I think sort of from the beginning there was this notion for me of it's more complicated than just taking this figure ground issue of object over here and space over here. And I think that kind of complexity motivated me to want to get rid of the middle of a piece of sculpture.
When you encounter a sandback, it's typically literally a line strung across the space that you and the work occupy.
You see the negative space as much as you see the outline of the piece. And the negative space actually becomes the weight in the volume. Your mind does a lot of the work for you. And what's not there, as much as what is there, becomes the sculpture.
The way the work relates to scale and volume is different than a traditional sculptural work in that rather than occupying the space, it frames or otherwise defines it.
Illusions are real and reality is elusive. So there's an inherent illusion there as soon as any kind of figure exists.
I feel like there's a perceptual focus that the work demands from you, as well as attention and time, which slowly but surely elicit a sense of calmness, which is very unique, I feel, in the art of the period. Like many artists coming of age in the mid-60s, Fred Sandback early on in his career reduced his vocabulary of forms and materials. Around 66, 67, Sandback made his first line sculpture, thinking more about really threading a line through space and connecting it to the architecture. He used metal rods to describe a very simple geometric form. By the early 70s, Sandback tried elastic cords, moving into eventually acrylic yarn because it retains that slight elasticity and flexibility and responsiveness to the conditions without losing its tension. There is what they would call this kind of fuzz or fuzzy effect. The sculpture at once exists and disappears. The relationship between Dia and Sandback actually predates the founding of Dia. When Sandback was still a student at Yale, Heiner Friedrich, one of the three founders of Dia, gave him his first solo exhibition in Germany in 1968. As Dia was established in 1974, the relationship with Sandback continued. One of the guiding principles of Dia was to work with a limited group of artists and devote time and resources into developing individual projects. So the Fred Sandback Museum in Winchendon, Massachusetts, opened in 1981. And during the 15 years run of the museum, Dia also presented the work of Sandback in New York City at other sites that the foundation was maintaining at the time. By the time we get to the late 90s, Dia invested in what we now know as Dia Beacon, and artists such as Sandback were invited to choose an area of the museum that was congenial to their work, and that resulted in the installation that we see today. The exhibition opened in 2003. Sandback died shortly after, and the exhibition that we present today is the exhibition that Sandback had conceived and installed and selected for Beacon.
I met Fred Sandback in 2003 when Fred arrived to do the initial installation here at Dia Beacon. Fred installed every single piece of yarn by himself, solo. And I think you can sense that. He pretty much lived in the space. And he spent a lot of time observing because his work so much relates to the architecture. It's in response to the architecture.
The works that we see here were not specifically made for Beacon, but their color, as well as the number of threads he would use, as well as the, of course, length of the thread, were all adapted and calibrated to the space by Sandback. It's not so much contrast, I would say, that he was necessarily looking for, but more a relationship with the environment. So in this case, scale, natural light, openings to the outside were all factors that certainly Sandback took into consideration.
To me, it's now part of the building, architecturally, really. This piece 10 vertical construction over here, to me, it's holding up the roof. This installation is 100% exactly what Fred's initial installation was, right down to the exact anchor points. Nothing's changed. The work is refabricated, so it's new yarn, but the exact same pieces.
Traditionally, there's a whole set of unwritten rules that are imposed in the relationship between you and the artwork. Sandback was interested in kind of undermining those rules and generating an encounter where you would feel more at ease in sharing the space with the sculptural object, and in that way also finding a place within the institution that hosts it.